Because behind the polished smiles, designer dresses, and carefully curated Instagram calm, something far darker is being whispered about in private circles. And it all starts with one number that refuses to go away. $1 million. A month. That's the figure exploding across the internet right now. An alleged allowance. A billionaire safety net. And a level of power that doesn't just change lifestyles, it rewrites family hierarchies. So here's the real question no one wants to say out loud. Did money quietly end the Beckham family dynamic as we knew it? Because while the world fixated on wedding drama and icy silence, insiders claim something else was happening behind closed doors. Messages. Screenshots. Conversations never meant to be public. Messages that, if they ever surfaced, could flip this entire narrative upside down. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because sources close to the situation insist those messages aren't coming from Nicola's camp. They are coming from Victoria Beckham's phone. So ask yourself this: if everything is so peaceful, so healed, so unbothered, why is everyone so afraid of what hasn't been released yet? Because when old money meets old grudges, silence isn't calm. It's a countdown. The whispers didn't start online. They started quietly, in rooms where phones were turned face down and names were spoken carefully. Because once you understand where the money comes from, you start to understand why this situation feels so untouchable. Nicola Peltz isn't just wealthy. She comes from a family that operates on a level most celebrities never reach. Her father, Nelson Peltz, isn't famous for red carpets or paparazzi shots. He's known for boardroom takeovers, corporate pressure, and influence that moves silently. This isn't flashy celebrity cash. This is decision-maker money, the kind that doesn't need validation, headlines, or approval. And according to multiple insiders, that difference is exactly where everything began to fracture. Because for decades, the Beckham family was the center of gravity. David and Victoria built an empire through discipline, control, and relentless image management. Their world runs on structure, on expectations, on the belief that privilege should come with pressure. Even their children were raised with one consistent message: independence must be earned. But Nicola's world doesn't work that way. In her universe, wealth is generational. It's designed to insulate, not motivate. To cushion, not challenge. Private jets aren't rewards. They are transportation. Five-figure hotel suites aren't milestones. They are default settings. And once Brooklyn married into that system, sources say the balance inside his life shifted almost immediately. Suddenly, he wasn't the son of David Beckham navigating a legacy. He was the husband of Nicola Peltz, protected by a fortune that predates fame and doesn't require public approval. That's when the rumors started circulating. Claims that Nicola receives a massive monthly allowance from her father. A number so outrageous it sounded fake, until people close to both families stopped denying the access and started debating the figure instead. And that distinction matters. Because whether it's $1 million a month or not, the reality is the same. Nicola doesn't rely on Brooklyn. And Brooklyn no longer relies on the Beckhams. That changes everything. Because when money removes consequences, emotional negotiations collapse. Apologies lose urgency. Distance becomes sustainable. And then came the photos. Brooklyn and Nicola, photographed inside one of California's most exclusive luxury hideaways. A place known for hosting royalty, billionaires, and people whose names never trend. On the table, an ultra-rare bottle of wine valued at tens of thousands of dollars. Not hidden, not subtle. Placed deliberately in frame. To some, it looked like romance. To others, it looked like a message. We're fine. We're comfortable. We don't need you. And while those images were lighting up social media, something else was happening quietly. According to sources familiar with the situation, Victoria Beckham was seeing a very different side of this story. Text messages. Conversations tied to the wedding fallout. The infamous dress situation. Moments where emotions allegedly escalated behind the scenes. Messages that, if released, could reshape how Nicola is perceived publicly. But they weren't released. Not because Victoria couldn't. Because she wouldn't. Those close to the Beckhams say that silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. A last attempt to keep a door open for reconciliation. Because once private messages become public weapons, there's no undoing the damage. At the same time, insiders claim the Beckhams' concern was growing. Not just about distance, but about how fast Brooklyn's world had changed. His lifestyle. His priorities. His sense of loyalty. They allegedly believed reconciliation was still possible, but only under one condition: that Nicola could no longer be at the center of his life. And that's where everything breaks. Because Brooklyn doesn't see Nicola as control. He sees her as protection, as peace, as the person who helped him step away from years of anxiety and pressure. In his mind, leaving wasn't abandonment. It was survival. Two families, two philosophies, one son caught between structure and insulation. And as the money kept flowing, so did the distance. What made the situation even more volatile wasn't just the money. It was how quickly it rewired loyalty. According to people watching this unfold from the inside, the shift wasn't gradual. It was abrupt, almost surgical. 1 minute Brooklyn was navigating life under the Beckham framework, public expectations, family optics, carefully managed narratives. The next, he was existing in a world where none of that mattered. Because when you're surrounded by wealth that doesn't need applause, you stop performing. And that's when friends of the Beckhams allegedly started noticing something unsettling. Brooklyn wasn't just distant. He was unreachable. Conversations felt filtered. Plans were vague. Visits became rare. And every attempt to reconnect seemed to hit the same invisible wall. Nicola. Sources close to the situation claim she became Brooklyn's primary shield. Not publicly aggressive. Not openly confrontational. Just quietly decisive. Invitations declined. Tensions reframed. Boundaries enforced. From the outside, it looked like calm. Inside, it felt like separation. And then the narrative flipped. Brooklyn went public. Carefully. Emotionally. Speaking about anxiety, pressure, and relief. Framing distance as healing. Framing space as peace. And suddenly, the story wasn't about family dynamics anymore. It was about survival. That caught the Beckhams off guard. Because while Brooklyn was sharing his truth, David and Victoria said nothing. No rebuttal. No counter-narrative. No damage control interviews. Which only fueled speculation. Why stay silent if the accusations weren't fair? Insiders say the answer was devastatingly simple. They didn't want to escalate. Because behind the scenes, things were already fragile. Allegedly, Victoria had access to conversations that painted a much messier picture. Messages exchanged during emotionally charged moments. Statements made in private that contradicted the polished public persona now being presented. Not illegal. Not explosive on their own. But powerful enough to shift public sympathy. And yet, those messages stayed private. At the same time, rumors began circulating about how deeply Brooklyn had embedded himself into the Peltz universe. Not just emotionally, but structurally. Legal advisors, financial planners, lifestyle managers. A support system that didn't intersect with the Beckham machine at all. That matters. Because once someone is financially insulated, emotional leverage disappears. You don't need approval. You don't need reconciliation. You don't need to negotiate. And that's when the allowance rumors hit. $1 million a month. Whether accurate or not, the symbolism detonated online. Comment sections exploded. Headlines spiraled. People stopped asking whether Brooklyn could come back and started asking why he would. Because from the outside, his life looked effortless. Private flights. Ultra-luxury vacations. A home that screamed permanence, not transition. Every photo reinforced the same message. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't rebuilding. He was thriving. Which made the Beckham silence feel heavier. Sources say David and Victoria weren't angry. They were alarmed. Because the issue wasn't rebellion. It was replacement. Their influence, once central, had become optional. Their role, once foundational, had been reduced to background noise. And as public perception began to tilt, another unsettling possibility started circulating quietly. That Brooklyn story wasn't done being told. That conversations were happening. About interviews. About platforms. About something more permanent. A book. Nothing confirmed. Nothing announced. Just whispers. But whispers loud enough to rattle people who understand what a memoir really is. Because a book doesn't just tell a story. It freezes one version of reality forever. And once that happens, silence is no longer a shield. And this is where the story stops being about distance and starts being about leverage. Because once the idea of a book entered the conversation, everything changed. Not publicly. Quietly. The kind of quiet that only happens when powerful people realize the narrative might slip out of their control. According to insiders, the mere suggestion of Brooklyn putting his story on permanent record sent shockwaves through both camps. Not because of lies, but because of perspective. A memoir doesn't need to be explosive to be damaging. All it needs is one-sided clarity. And Brooklyn, sources say, feels very clear. Clear about the pressure of growing up inside a global brand. Clear about the anxiety of living under constant expectation. Clear about the relief he felt when he stepped away. What he doesn't feel clear about, allegedly, is reconciliation. Because reconciliation requires discomfort. And discomfort doesn't exist in his current world. The Peltz universe is built to absorb fallout. Legal teams, advisors, private solutions to public problems. A structure that makes backlash manageable and criticism optional. That kind of insulation doesn't just protect wealth. It reshapes decision-making. And that's what worries the Beckhams most. Sources close to them say David and Victoria still believe time could soften everything. That Brooklyn might miss his siblings. That distance could dull resentment. That silence might leave space for return. But every signal coming from Brooklyn suggests the opposite. The photos keep coming. Sun-soaked vacations. Love songs and captions. Luxury backdrops that feel intentionally calm. Each image reinforcing the same message. He's not lost, not spiraling, not regretting anything. He's settled. And that's where Victoria Beckham's restraint becomes the most dangerous element in this entire saga. Because according to people familiar with the situation, those messages still exist. Untouched, unreleased, sitting quietly, not as revenge, as insurance. Because once certain lines are crossed publicly, there's no walking back. Releasing those messages would end any remaining path to reconciliation. It would lock everyone into opposing sides permanently. So she waits. Meanwhile, public opinion continues to split. Some see Brooklyn as brave. Others see him as insulated. Some view Nicola as supportive. Others as strategic. And that ambiguity is exactly what keeps this story alive. Because no one can agree on the villain. What makes this feud so volatile isn't drama. It's imbalance. Two powerful families. Two completely different philosophies. One son who no longer needs to compromise. And that's the uncomfortable truth sitting at the center of it all. Brooklyn Beckham isn't negotiating from emotion anymore. He's negotiating from security. And when security is guaranteed, reconciliation becomes optional. So the question isn't whether this situation will resurface. It's when. Because as long as those messages remain private, as long as the book rumors linger, as long as Brooklyn continues to define peace as distance, this story isn't over. It's paused. And when it resumes, it won't be about weddings or dresses or awkward family photos. It will be about power, control, and the moment a global family realized they could no longer pull their son back from a world that doesn't need them. And that kind of reckoning never stays quiet forever. So now the question is yours. Do you believe this is really about love and mental health? Or are we watching what happens when money quietly removes consequences? Because one thing is undeniable. Brooklyn Beckham isn't operating from need anymore. He's operating from insulation. And that changes every emotional decision behind the scenes. When comfort is guaranteed, reconciliation becomes optional. When power shifts, silence becomes strategy. And that's why this story refuses to die. Because somewhere, messages are still unreleased. Somewhere, narratives are still being shaped. And somewhere, people are waiting to see who blinks first. Does Victoria ever release what she's holding? Does Brooklyn ever tell his story in his own words? Or does this feud stay frozen behind luxury photos and curated calm? Drop your honest take in the comments. Is Nicola protecting Brooklyn, or replacing his family? Is silence restraint, or the calm before destruction? And if you think this situation is already explosive, trust me, we're nowhere near the ending yet. Make sure you like this video if you caught the signs others missed. Subscribe if you want the stories no one else is brave enough to connect. And turn on notifications, because when this breaks again, and it will, you'll want to hear it first. Because in a world of old money, old grudges, and quiet power, the truth never disappears. It just waits.